The rainy season that year had been the strongest ever, and the river had broken its banks. There were floods everywhere, and the animals were all running up into the hills. The floods came so fast that many drowned except for the lucky monkeys who used their proverbial agility to climb up into the treetops. They looked down on the surface of the water where the fish were swimming and gracefully jumping out of the water as if they were the only ones enjoying the devastating flood. One of the monkeys saw the fish and shouted to his companion, "Look down, my friend. Look at those poor creatures. They are going to drown. Do you see how they struggle in the water?" "Yes," said the other monkey. "What a pity. Probably they were late in escaping to the hills because they seemed to have no legs. How can we save them?" "I think we must do something. Let's go close to the edge of the flood where the water is not deep enough to cover us, and we can help them get out." So the monkeys did just that. They started catching the fish, but not without difficulty. One by one, they brought them out of the water and put them carefully on the dry land. After a short time, there was a pile of fish lying on the grass, motionless. One of the monkeys said, "Do you see? They were tired. But now they're just sleeping and resting. Had it not been for us, my friend, all these poor people without legs would have drowned." The other monkey said, "They were trying to escape from us because they could not understand our good intentions. But when they wake up, they will be very grateful because we have brought them salvation." So the world is like the flood, and it is surrounded by agile monkeys with good intentions. And if we are not conscious, if we are not doing our own due diligence, we begin to fall prey to those good intentions of those who would rather see for us something different than perhaps we know innately is good for ourselves. The difference between us and the fish is that we do have legs. We have physical legs. We have the ability of motion to be able to take us into realms and energy systems and collectives that are of like mind to support our particular conscious mind and our path. We have a brain, which incorporates the ability to use mind, which allows us to choose. We have all kinds of things within us. We have a guidance system. We have our intuition that we've talked about in these last weeks. But if we are not aware of or cognizant of the fact that that gift resides within us, then we are pretty much like those fish. And we are allowing ourselves to be scooped up into inappropriate circumstances that do not bring us life. And we can't blame the agile monkey because we know better. And as we look at these past weeks in this month of May, when we've been talking about these two interwoven themes, one is spiritual guidance, and the other is our personal responsibility with that guidance, then what we know is it is our responsibility to actively seek that guidance. And by actively seek, it means that everything within us should be surrendering towards a greater depth of understanding about the potency and the power of source, of intelligence, of that which we know God to be. Actively seeking that. What I began to understand and observe is that when we don't actively seek it, then we are very much like those fish, but we are unconscious of the fact that we are being laid out. We are being dried out. We are withering. We are becoming spiritually dehydrated so much that it would take a lot to be able to bring us back to life. And so as we began to look and understand this, we began to consider the fact that there is so much that begs for our attention. There is so much that stands on the precipice of consciousness that is waiting in quiet repose for us to recognize it, to reawaken, and to begin to take ownership of the beauty of who and what we are. Every single moment, to actively be seeking that. And we've gone through periods in our life where we've been very, very passive. We've allowed our power to be given to other people. We've allowed our choice and decision-making to be handed over to a collective. We have allowed so many things to be robbed from us. But when we begin to reawaken, we are taking those things back. We are magnetizing that power. We are accumulating all of those things. And what we are beginning to understand by the terminology of taking something back is that it actually never left us. That it has been within us all along. And so in understanding that, we look at some of the words of our founder, Ernest Holmes, when he said that everyone is imbued with the qualities of God. Everyone. Everyone is like that joyful fish before it's been interrupted. Everyone is imbued with the qualities of God, and as such, as we open to the truth of our being, we begin to reveal what we already are. A divine expression of the one life that God is. I believe of all the spiritual sentiments, of all of the way in which truth is articulated, this is one of my favorites. The idea that the thing that we've been seeking, the thing that we've been hungering for, the thing that we've longed for so many years in our life, all of those dark nights of the soul where we have wandered and searched for something only to come to the realization that the thing that we've been searching for has been where? Inside us all along. I love that idea. And sometimes in my forgetfulness, I can take that idea and I can go, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I remember? And yet, when I calm down and I reconnect, I can laugh at that and I can go, how silly it is to think that I lack for anything when all that is within me. That's the responsibility of understanding that this guidance thing, this thing where we seek some kind of external wisdom, is not external at all, but it is a part of the very fabric of who and what we are. So I began this month with how do we begin to practice that? And I wanted to give you a tangible thing, a mantra. And we talked about in that first week the idea of that you and I are the center of divine attraction. I gave you a little handout. I told you to look at that handout and to use that mantra and begin to repeat that as such so that it begins to infiltrate and it begins to land itself within consciousness. Because we understand that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the same was in the beginning with God, and that all things were made through this Word. And when we understand what Word means, we see the spiritual intentionality and the energy behind Word. And when Word is coupled with feeling, it must, by law, by its very nature, become our reality. And so we say things like, I am the center of divine attraction. And if we're committed to that exercise, which I wanted you to be, then you begin to see systematically the science, the empirical evidence behind what this philosophy is about. Because the tangibility of law then presents itself to us, and we begin to reap the benefits of claiming that I am the center of divine attraction. And we understood that the use of the I am does not take away from anybody else's good. And so that's part of that responsibility, is to begin to speak and articulate those kinds of things at depth and with commitment and with regularity, and not just when it's convenient. And not when we're just in crisis, but at all times and in all ways, giving thanks. And last week we talked about the ever-presence of the feminine energy of that which is intuition. Any of you ever stood on the bank of like a pond or a river early in the morning and you see that steam rise above it? I think that that's what intuition must be like. It's that thing that just sort of hovers at the top, waiting to be recognized. And when we understand that intuition is a constant within us, and we learn how to use it and learn how to trust it, then that guidance then isn't so much externalized again, it's internalized, and it's obeyed from within. And we understand and we begin to know and begin to trust that which is us, that which is a part of that collective. As Ernest said, everything is imbued with the quality of God. That is me. And I begin to trust that. And so we understand then this idea of responsibility and the fact that it is personal. It's personal. If you're going to take anything personally, take responsibility personally. And understand the magnificence of who and what you are. I've been fascinated by all things Paramahansa Yogananda lately. And I am rereading the autobiography of a yogi. I think the first time I didn't quite get it. This time I'm just devouring it. And that led me to Netflix, where I watched, there's the most brilliant documentary on his life called Awake. And it's on Netflix, and you must watch it. And I was fascinated by the fact that when he came here as this yogi from India, and he landed in Boston Harbor in the 1920s, and he was this mysterious brown-haired, brown-skinned man with a turban, and they called him Swami, that when he first got to speak to a westernized audience, he did not use language that was Hindu in nature, but that the very first talk title that he ever gave was called The Science of Religion. And we, as religious scientists, can begin to understand and appreciate the idea of what a science is. That to take something spiritual and weave it in with the science of that spirituality is to understand and know that there is a science within the soul. There's not a creed, there's not dogma, there's a science to the way in which you and I can evolve if we choose to. And to begin, and again, understanding that because it's empirical, then your personal practice is the thing that produces that scientific process and that scientific result. And what do we know about any process? That to the degree of one's commitment is the degree of the outcome. To the degree that I live this stuff half-heartedly is the degree in which I produce half-hearted results. To the degree that I surrender myself to the science of that which is my soul, and I begin to take on the value system of God as me, through me, then look out. Because my life then becomes exemplified through that way. You start to understand then that you get to create church within yourself. And you are the minister of your own soul. You create church within yourself, and you are the minister of your own soul. And you get used to standing in your power. And you get used to understanding that thought is creative. And you get used to understanding that your mind is that which is the mind that created worlds. And you begin to disassociate all anxiety and all fear and all self-deprecation. And you begin to move and trust and understand the beauty of what you are. What I love about the science part of it is that the more that we evolve in our own technological world, the more we understand the human brain. We've all got a brain, and that brain becomes the catalyst by which mind works. Brain is not mind. Mind is everything. Mind is your clothing. Mind is this building. Mind is light. Mind is sound. Mind is you. We are all a part of mind. And our brain allows us to access and to begin to choose objectively and subjectively the way in which we entertain mind. And I was reading this thing about the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. I'm sure you read about the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. But basically what it says is that the brain is prejudiced to patterns. It loves patterns. And the moment that you establish a committed pattern within the brain, then it begins to replicate that thing. I was thinking about that because I was mowing my yard yesterday, and the neighbors' clover patches have now invaded into my yard. And I love me some clover. There's a legend about my dad. When we lived in Beaumont, Texas, we had a postage stamp-sized front yard. But he had convinced all of the neighborhood children on our street that that postage-sized stamp front yard was magic. Because he would stand there with his baggy trousers and his change in his pocket, and he would very slowly empty out all of the change into the clover in our front yard. I don't know who mowed that yard back then, but I bet it wasn't pretty. But anyway, emptying all of that change. And then he would tell the kids, I don't know about your yard, this yard, magic. And so, story says that every neighborhood kid was hunched on all fours through the grass in our yard constantly, finding money. And so that happened before I entered into the world and he passed away. But every time I see a clover patch, or every time I see coins on the ground, I think that that's his way of communicating with me. So I have this thing about clover patches. So I'm mowing my front yard. And it took me forever to mow it. Because I mow, and I hold the mower, and I'm looking in the clover patch. Sometimes the motor just keeps running, and I'm looking for a 4-leaf clover. And guess what? Every time I find a 4-leaf clover, I find another one, almost right next to it, and another one. And I start to think of this Bader-Meinhof phenomenon that the brain loves a pattern. And I love the idea that when I am concentrated on looking for that one thing, and when I find it, what do I see? Another one and another one. And if that's the way that science of the brain is working, then the science of that which is mind, of consciousness, says that when you deliberately focus on something, then that something will replicate. And you and I are divinely guided and have a personal responsibility to understand that I have the freedom to look and to choose what it is that I'm looking at. So if I want to continue to choose to look at illness, then that phenomenon says that my brain's going to love the pattern. And I'm just going to continue to draw to me things, all things illness. But if I want to continue to look at limitation, that all things limitation will continue to be my experience. But if I want to look at all things abundant, then without question, the science of that is going to bring to me that equivalent. And what I love about that thing which is science is that it's spiritual. If you're familiar with the Science of Mind textbook, in the very beginning, Ernest Holmes' wish in the very beginning of his big spiritual tome was this: I look forward to the day when science and religion can walk hand in hand. When we understand that the science of the soul, of the cosmos, of that which is God, is the same structural component of which I am made of, then I need want for nothing. Everyone is imbued with the qualities of God, and as such, as we open to the truth of our being, we reveal what we already are, a divine expression. And so we understand that our bodies are comprised of these protons and these electrons, that it's all energy. And when I begin to consciously use this energy, then I realize that I am the basic same stuff as that of creation. And so what's my responsibility with that? How am I going to begin to incorporate that? How am I going to begin to use that? And so I stand in the abundance of the fact that even when the floods come and the agile monkeys want to tell me something differently, I have the wherewithal to walk another way. I have the wherewithal to choose a different thought. I have the wherewithal to understand and know and to recalibrate myself and realign myself back to the idea of what is true. And so, 3 things. Number 1, we are it. We are it. I used to love to say, you're all that and a bag of chips. You are it. You are it. There's only one life. That life is divine, and what we must be a part of that life. So I am a part of that. I am the itness of that which is life. I am that. My life, then, is an exemplification of my belief. What you see externally is a representation of what is going on internally. As above, so below. As within, so without. I just made that up. No one's ever said that before in the history of all spirituality. How many times have you heard that? Since the dawn of time, every wise sage and teacher has reminded us. And so sometimes what we want to do is we want to go into this active prevention when the floods come and the agile monkeys are chattering away and telling us something. We want to fix that out there rather than doing our own internal work in here. So we pause. When we realize that our life then is a representation of everything that's going on internally. If I don't like something out there, is that somebody else's fault? Is it the flood's fault? Is it the monkey's fault? Is it the political system's fault? Is it your family's fault? Is it the fact that when they are building the Georgia Dome, they didn't contact you about the traffic that's going to happen? Is it their fault? All of the things that want to make up a lot of noise, that want to rob somehow you of the quality of your life. Is it that? Can anything be robbed of the quality of your life unless first there is an internal agreement by us to let that be so? That becomes the big question. Where have I agreed to this? Can you imagine by looking at all of our stuff, laying all of our inventory out and going, where have I agreed to this? Where have I agreed to this? Why did I agree to that? But in doing so, we take responsibility for those things and we begin to recalibrate that and understand that the science of my soul is waiting for my permission and my instruction. So we are it, and our life is our beliefs, and then we realign ourselves. And in realigning ourselves, we then begin to reveal truth. There is within us something that knows truth. There is something within us that knows truth. So when we're mowing, when we're mowing down other people, when we're not listening, because we're mowing through our thought system that's so out of control. We get to stop, and we get to look down, or we get to look up, or we get to look around, and we get to begin to choose what pattern that we want to establish within our life. This is our responsibility. This is our guidance. Now, I want you to understand that by stepping into your spirituality, it doesn't mean that the human part, the floods and the monkeys, cease. You hear me on that? The floods and the monkeys continue. I'm watching the documentary of Yogananda, and I'm amazed when it gets to this part where he's now established the Realization Fellowship in Los Angeles, and it's growing so rapidly that he sends back to India to bring his dearest friend, who has been working in his schools in India, to come and to help him. They've been lifelong friends. And in the sending of him and in the coming, something happens. Communication breaks down. I'm watching this, I'm going, but he's Paramahansa Yogananda. How could this happen to him? Do you see how we do this? He should have no floods and no monkeys in his life. He's self-actualized. And I start to begin to realize the depth of learning, the depth of remembering, the depth of reawakening that awaits you and I. I don't want any of us to be fooled by the fact that you take this class, I deem thee spiritual. You are done, my child. Go and sin no more. Because what happens is, if spirituality, or that which is the evolution of the soul, is infinite, then don't you see that the opportunities for growth are infinite? And so as I watched and I listened to the narration of his human suffering and his pain at this division between the friendship that he had with this man, I realized that this continues. There's a difference between being a follower and being a leader. If you're a follower, you can tune out for a little bit. If you're a leader, someone will always dislike you. If you're a leader, because you are the one that's doing the machete and going through the unknown terrain, there will be scrapes and bumps and bruises and falling and collapses. If you're a follower, that's all been done for you. And you're like, wow, I love this. But if you're a leader, you are open to ridicule. Paramahansa Yogananda was ridiculed in the press. Oh my God. And yet he just kept returning back to his practice of going within. And kept returning back to his practice of going within. How many of you have embarked upon this energy and essence of leadership and thought, I don't have what it takes for this. I think I'm just going to follow. But you know what? What are you destined to be? A leader. Each of us is destined to lead our own path. And that path is cultivated by the patterning of thought and choices. So yes, it's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. A lot. But in the awareness of that, you to begin to cultivate and learn to trust oneself. Because if it's all done for us, then what's the point? And so we begin to celebrate the fact that our personal practice is a scientific process. And we begin to see, when does it become the priority? When does it become the key ingredient of our choices? Regardless of the floods, regardless of the outside world. When do we stop the mowing long enough to look and to begin to establish a new pattern of what is available for us? There is that beautiful line that says, "We are the ones we have been waiting for." So in this triune message of guidance and responsibility, you and I have been given gifts. Gifts of instruction, gifts of inspiration, gifts that we already know, that are already inside of us. Will you take those gifts? And will you allow the breath of life to be breathed into them, so they don't just sit on terra firma while the monkeys wait for you to wake up and appreciate what they've done for you? But will you become your own leader? And will you rise up? Will you rise up into the power, into the beauty, into the majesty of what you are? And as they always say, if not now, when? And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com. And there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.